Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for participating with us in the Reading Diagnostic Intervention Grant Steering Committee. So welcome virtually to this is a newly appointed committee, and thank you to all of those who are viewing remotely. I am Christy Biggerstaff, and I'm the Director of Early Literacy for the Kentucky Department of Education. And with me are representatives of the Kentucky Department of Education Office of Teaching and Learning, and that is Ms. Mickey Ray, the Chief Academic Officer, Policy Advisor Sarah Peace, and Read to Achieve Grant Director Danielle Ward. Before we begin, I do have a few announcements about conducting virtual meetings. The meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meeting Act. Accordingly, members of the Grant Steering Committee must ensure their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Excuse me. Members, please mute your microphones when not talking. However, all discussions must be broadcast to the public. Therefore, be sure your microphone is not on mute when you speak. Every time you speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause, and this will give the software time to recognize you. For any items that require a vote, a roll call will be necessary to record the vote of each committee member, which at the time, the member should state his or her name, pause, and then state, I vote yes or I vote no. We're going to start with a roll call, and at this time, we're going to document the attendance of those present at today's meeting. Names will be announced according to how they're listed in KRS 158.794. But I'm going to begin with the two non-voting members who serve on the committee by virtue of their position. When I call your name, I will also include the role in which you've been assigned as provided in statute. When your name and role has been called, please state your name for the record and announce present. To begin, I'm serving as the Commissioner of Education's designee, and I will announce for the record that I, Christy Biggerstaff, am present. Next, Ms. Shannon Sampson, the Director of the College of Education Evaluation Center.
I, Shannon Sampson, am present.
Thank you. Next, we also have Josh Parsons, Evaluation Specialist at the College of Education Evaluation Center.
I, Josh Parsons, am present.
Thank you. I will now call the names of the remaining members. As an appointee of the governor, you serve as a voting member of the committee. Bobby Barrier, primary program teacher.
Hi, Bobby Barrier, present.
Thank you. Amy Ritter, primary program teacher.
I, Amy Ritter, am present.
Thank you. Ashley Tackett, primary program teacher. Okay. Dominique Pleasant Moore, primary program teacher.
I, Dominique Pleasant Moore, present.
Thank you. Ms. Janice Almacy, post-secondary faculty.
I, Janice Almacy, am present.
Thank you. Sam Sams, elementary school principal.
Sam Sams, present.
Jessica Sparrow, library media specialist.
Jessica Sparrow, am present.
Thank you. Molly Boyd, elementary school parent.
I'm Molly Boyd, am present.
Thank you. Paula Pleasant, elementary special education teacher. Mary Bell, private sector member with reading intervention experience.
I, Mary Bell, am present.
Thank you. Dawn Sexton, elementary reading intervention teacher.
Dawn Sexton, present.
Amy Hatzel, teacher with experience assisting children who are deaf or hard of hearing. Thank you. So how many voting members do we have present? ladies? Is there 6 or 7? I believe we just have 7. So,
Sorry, can
No,
you
I
hear
believe
me
we have
okay?
8.
do we have 8?
And
Good,
I just
okay.
wanted to, Mary Bell, I see that you're here. Thank you. Okay, I can see that better now.
Okay.
And if, let's see.
So Sarah, you'll need to track those notes because I can't both share my screen and
Yes,
do that.
yes, perfect. I just wanted to double check. Paula Pleasant, are you here? Okay, and Amy Hatzel, I don't think she is here, correct? And then Jessica Sparrow. She is.
I'm here, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes, I have the same count as Mickey does. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you, ladies. So we do have a quorum. That is awesome. There's 8 voting members present. Therefore, we can proceed to the next item, which is approval of the agenda. The agenda for the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Steering Committee meeting was provided in a press release issued on January the 23rd. You will see that the agenda is going to be displayed on your screen, and I'm going to give you a moment to review before I proceed with the roll call. You all see that agenda, or is it's black, isn't it? Okay.
No.
I can see the opening screen, but I haven't seen the next screen.
Technical difficulties. There we go. There's the agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mickey.
So just my KDE friends, I had advanced it. So Sarah, my computer is doing what yours will typically do. So we may need to switch out the sharing to see if someone else's will work better this morning. But for now,
Okay.
here's the agenda.
I'll let you know if it does not advance.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work. Sarah, I think maybe could you try to share your PowerPoint screen because it's all blurred.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully I will not run into the same issue. It's a Teams related issue where sharing, I have to turn it on and off. And so I just want to make sure I'm going to share my screen now and hopefully there won't be any issues.
She's hopefully getting that pulled up.
Yes. Just one
I'm going to go
moment.
ahead. Did everybody get to see the agenda as it was on the screen previously? Okay. And then you all received a copy as well. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Jessica Sparrow, I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Sam Sams, I second that.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me see. Are we having any ability to see a presentation right now?
Yes, I see it on the screen.
Is it, let me ask one more question. I'm sorry. Is it, so is it advancing through the slides? Like here's the agenda and now here is the purpose. Are you able to see everything correctly? Is it full screen? Because mine's split up.
No, but it's fine.
Okay.
We can just
Okay,
roll.
We can
better
see
than
it now.
nothing. We can
Yeah.
get, okay.
This
Thank
is
you.
and I can't see anything. Like my screen is totally like I can see your all's names, but all of the little boxes are white. And then the screen where I should see sharing is also white. Do I need to exit and come back in?
This is frustrating. Yeah.
You might try that, Dawn. The reality is, we'll need to wait for you to enter back in before we can move on. But just sometimes Teams is funny, so you may want to do that.
Okay, so you do need to exit out and come back in?
I think that will help you as you continue on over the course of the meeting.
I'll do that for you. Okay.
I'm also going to go ahead and download it as a PowerPoint because, I mean, as a PDF, so maybe that will go through the slides a little more easily and it has the same content as a backup.
I'm going to wait for Dawn to re-enter. Hopefully that will fix her screen issue, and then we can go on with voting around the agenda.
Okay, this is Dawn Sexton. I'm back, but it didn't change anything, so I'll just be listening.
So Dawn, one thing that I think we can try, we can put the link to the PowerPoint
in the chat box.
I think so, and that may be better for everybody. We just won't have Dr. Sampson slides for you.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. I'm not sure why I can't see anything.
Well, projection is also something we're figuring out, so that is okay.
Okay. I'm going to continue on, and we had a motion and a second to approve the agenda. So I'm going to go ahead and do another roll call. So the member should state his or her name, pause, and then say, I vote yes or I vote no for the approval of the agenda. Bobby Barrier.
Aye, Bobby Barrier, approve.
Thank you. Amy Ritter.
I, Amy Ritter, vote yes.
Thank you. Ashley Tackett. Dominique Pleasant Moore.
I, Dominique Pleasant Moore, vote yes.
Thank you. Janice O'Macy.
I, Janice L. Macy, vote yes.
Thank you. Sam Sams.
Sam Sams, I vote yes.
Thank you. Jessica Sparrow.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Thank you. Molly Boyd.
Molly Boyd, I vote yes.
Thank you. Paula Pleasant. Mary Bell.
Mary Bell, I vote yes.
Thank you. And Dawn Sexton.
Dawn Sexton, I vote yes.
Thank you. The committee has voted and the agenda for today's meeting has been approved. With the approval of the agenda, we're going to begin with Ms. Sarah Peace, the policy advisor for the Office of Teaching and Learning, and Sarah will be providing an overview and discuss the purpose, role, and responsibilities of the committee. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Ms. Sarah.
Let me see. Good morning, everyone. Are you able to see the agenda on the screen right now? Okay. Holding my breath. See if we can advance a slide here. Do you see now the purpose? Okay. I'm just going to say Friday is looking down upon us. Good. It is such a pleasure to speak with you today, and some of you I have met before. My role is to discuss the policy or the law behind the work that you're going to be doing today. And just to speak to those pieces, I do not work in the content area, so I'm very grateful to have Christy and Mickey here to support you. But as a go through just the purpose, the roles and responsibilities of the work you'll do as a committee. You can just let me know if you have any other questions. First, I just want to begin with the committee's purpose, which you have here, which is really within 3 different areas. But your purpose is to advise the Kentucky Board of Education and us as the Kentucky Department of Education concerning the implementation and administration of universal screeners, the reading diagnostic assessments, and then statewide professional development programming for early literacy. On this steering committee, there is a composition that includes 14 total members, and the members are to be appointed by the governor's office, of which each of you have been. We have a commissioner's designee, as you know, which is Christy Biggerstaff here today. And then you heard the roles read during roll call of the different educators, post-secondary educator, community members who are all here to collaborate together on these important decisions for our students. The responsibilities of the committee, we have their responsibilities as a committee, but then I'm going to give you some little more detail behind that. But our committee serves so you can advise the KDE on identifying needs and trends and issues that you're seeing as reading experts. We also wanted to discuss and make recommendations regarding the Read to Achieve grant, which is codified under KRS 158.792. And then also your work will involve advising us on the costs, the effectiveness of the reading intervention programs that are being considered. In your advisement responsibilities, so beyond your responsibility as a committee, but while you're advising the KDE, you'll help to suggest universal screeners for reading in K through 3. We also will lean on you to suggest criteria for the reading diagnostic assessments for K through 3. And then lastly, you'll advise the KDE on the professional development program, like I mentioned before, for early literacy skills and student engagement. Any questions as of yet? And then, as we mentioned, we will do an election of a committee chair and a vice chair, which will occur just right after I complete this policy slide, and if you have any other questions. But KRS 158.794, which is the statute supporting all of this work, Section 4 asks for the election of a committee chair and vice chair. If you've been with us before, this is familiar to you. And by majority vote, because we do have quorum today, we're able to vote for a chair, who's the presiding officer of the committee, as well as a vice chair, who will be available in that person's absence. So at this time, Christy, if there are no other questions about the policy pieces, roles, responsibilities, and purpose, I will pass it back over to you so we can do the election of the committee chair and vice chair.
Making sure nobody has any questions. Okay, so before hearing from the UK Evaluation Center, we will proceed to vote and elect a committee chair and vice chair. The chair and vice chair must be a voting member, as you are here today. Is there a person who would like to volunteer to act as the committee chair?
I'll volunteer to do that. Sam Sams.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for Sam Sams to serve as chair?
Jessica Sparrow, I make a motion for Sam Sams to serve as chair.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Molly Boyd, I second.
Thank you. Do I have let's see, might have to do 2 different roll calls here. Yes. So I'm going to do a roll call now that we have a motion and a second. As before, I'm going to say your name. Please state your name, pause, and say I vote yes or I vote no. Bobby Barrier.
I, Bobby Barrier, vote yes.
Amy Ritter.
I, Amy Ritter, vote yes.
Ashley Tackett. Dominique Pleasant Moore.
I, Dominique Pleasant Moore, vote yes.
Janice Almacy.
I, Janice Almacy, vote yes.
Sam Sams.
Sam Sams, vote yes.
Jessica Sparrow.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Molly Boyd.
Molly Boyd, I vote yes.
Paula Pleasant. Mary Bell.
I, Mary Bell, vote yes.
And Dawn Sexton.
I, Don Sexton, vote yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved and Sam Sams will serve as the committee's chair. We're going to follow the same procedure to elect the committee's vice chair. Do I have a volunteer who would be willing to serve as the vice chair?
I, Bobby Barrier, will serve as vice chair.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for Bobby Barrier to serve as vice chair?
Make a motion for Bobby Barrier to serve as vice chair. Sam Sams.
Thank you. A second?
I, Amy Ritter, second the motion.
Thank you. So now that we have a motion and a second, I'm going to do a roll call again. Please state your name and say I vote yes or I vote no. Bobby Barrier.
Bobby Barrier, I vote yes.
Amy Ritter.
Amy Ritter, I vote yes.
Ashley Tackett. Dominique Pleasant Moore.
I, Dominique Pleasant Moore, vote yes.
Janice Almacy.
I, Janice Almacy, vote yes.
Sam Sams.
I, Sam Sams, vote yes.
Jessica Sparrow.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Molly Boyd.
I, Molly Boyd, vote yes.
Paula Pleasant. Mary Bell.
I, Mary Bell, vote yes.
And Dawn Sexton.
I, Don Sexton, vote yes.
The motion has been approved and Bobby Barrier will serve as the committee's vice chair. So thank you both so much to our chair and vice chair for your willingness to serve on this committee. I appreciate that. Now we're going to have a presentation of the UK Evaluation Center by Dr. Sampson and Josh Parsons. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Sampson and Josh from that center who will present to you the Read to Achieve program evaluation reports for the school years 21 and 22.
All right, thank you. I am Shannon Sampson, and I will be leading this, but Josh will be weighing in as we have questions or need clarification. I will share my screen, and you all can let me know if it's doing what it needs to do in advancing. So do you see just the presentation, or do you see notes as well? It's actually fine, I think, if you see both. So we'll go ahead and get started, and someone just speak up if you cannot see me advancing. So just to start, I want to overview who was involved in the evaluation for this year. So I was the one who oversaw the evaluation, and then Josh Parsons, who's on the call, was the evaluation specialist that worked very closely with this project Joe Waddington joined our team this year. He's faculty at the University of Kentucky in Ed Policy Studies and Evaluation, and he has a background in working with quasi-experimental analyses and design. And then Yuyan Xia was our research assistant. We received this project. We contract with Center for Collaborative Literacy Development, so George Hruby and Chi Haoling. We reported to them to then provide this to the state. But we were the ones that did the study and wrote the report. So this is a 5-year plan for the 4-year cycle, but COVID pushed it an additional year. And so we have been the evaluation group throughout this full grant cycle, and we are finishing the 5th year. So we had a different focus for each of the years. And in this final year, we looked at the academic performance across the grant cycle and explored the impact of the +1 initiative. And that's what we set out to do in our original evaluation plan. Within this group and also from the Department of Education, we've been encouraged to look at how the different programs impact student achievement within Read to Achieve. And so that is something we did this year. And we also did some cost analyses this year. That's been another request for the last few years. So that's something we included and that we will report on today. And this is based on, I'm going to give a very high level snapshot of the large presentation, or the large report that we provided to Kentucky Department of Education, and that is publicly available. The topics in the report are a description of how the program was implemented in 2021-22. So this reports on the last year's work and the final year of the grant cycle. We talk about literacy capacity, high impact practices that were perceived. A few years ago, we did a deep dive into the schools that were sort of the outliers, the ones that had high reduction of novice, that had especially high performance on different measures where it was an unexpectedly high performance. And so we did interviews with folks at those schools, and they talked about the practices that they use. And so we implemented some analyses this year. We added to the survey what some of the practices that they did, and additionally impact practices from the literature. And within the surveys, asked different groups how they perceived the practices in their school to have impact. So that's included in this report. We look at student achievement, program comparisons within the Read to Achieve program, and then the cost analyses. The data sources for this year included stakeholder surveys. Surveys were sent to the Read to Achieve teachers, +1 teachers, administrators, and classroom teachers. Also, we used map data. We looked at the 2021 or 2020 to 2021 fall to spring map data, and then intervention tab data as well. A snapshot of the findings. So again, very high level, looking at literacy capacity, that we studied 2 types of literacy capacity, and the different groups that were surveyed rated their school in terms of how well they were implementing different pieces, or to the extent to which they felt like their school was doing or had the capacity to teach literacy well. And we did it at the beginning or midway through the grant cycle, and again at the end. And we saw, thinking about both the reading team and the school in general, there were modest gains in aggregate school literacy capacity. Reading team literacy capacity stayed in aggregate about the same, but there were modest gains in how different perspectives perceived their school literacy capacity. In terms of the high impact practices, impact ratings mirrored rankings from last year, and different roles have different ideas, slightly different ideas on the impact of different practices. And we will show you some of those today, because that may be a place to think about professional development in the future. With student achievement, the Read to Achieve students lag behind the national norms in terms of average MAP scores, which is not surprising. We're thinking within nationally, that's all the students, and Read to Achieve students are just a slice of the students across the state, but they are growing more than national comparators at most grade levels. Within the Read to Achieve program, the interventions varied in their impact on student reading growth fall to spring. We found that Reading Recovery and Reading Recovery plus CIM appear to be more effective than other interventions at helping first grade struggling readers improve their reading achievement. In second grade, they were about equal, the different programs. And then finally, with the cost analyses, 93% of funds are spent on teachers. And so for the most part, this is not a investment in programs, but an investment in teachers in schools. The median cost to implement Read to Achieve across the schools is $70,000, with just under $50,000 being provided by the grant, and then almost $23,000 on average being provided by the schools with supplemental funds. And then based on the available data, it appears that Reading Recovery has the highest per student rate for implementation. So I'll dive into some of the specifics of the snapshots of findings. And then again, the details are provided in the report. So who are the students? There were about 10,000, just over 10,000 students who were part of the Reading Recovery or Read to Achieve program this year. 49% female, 51% male. 77.2% on free and reduced lunch, 6.5% were English learners, and 23.9% also received services in special education. On this slide, we have the comparison to the state data. So 73.4% of the students in Read to Achieve are Caucasian or white, and that is compared very similar to the state percentage. So 74.37 statewide is that demographic. 10% Black or African American, which is compared to about the same statewide. 9.6% were Hispanic or Latino, and a little slightly bit less, 8% statewide for that. 6% were 2 or more races compared to 4% statewide, 4.68. And then 0.2% American Indian, Alaskan Native, Hawaiian Native, Pacific Islander. The grade breakdown, most of the students are in first grade, but this is a K through 3 program. And so you can see that a small percentage of students are in kindergarten and a small percentage in third grade, but most are first and then also followed by second grade. The teachers, we have 284 teachers who provided data for analysis. 98% of those teachers are women and white, and most of them have a master's or a rank 1. And many of them have a literacy specialist certification. You can see the degree fields where when they have an advanced degree, what they're getting their advanced degree in, and the top ones are literacy or reading, early childhood education, and then the next is administration or leadership. But a range of advanced degrees among the Read to Achieve teachers, again, with the most being with a literacy or reading focus. Most of the RTA interventionists have at least 15 years of teaching experience. And then a third of them have been reading, or RTA interventionists 1 to 3 years, and just under half have over 7 years of experience within the program. The +1 teacher, so that was an initiative for this grant cycle. Of the +1 teachers, these are typically newer teachers. 40% have only a bachelor's degree. 27% are early career teachers, so they have between 2 to 3 years of teaching experience. Most were highly involved in Read to Achieve previously. They reported that, and most were selected by their principal to participate. In terms of the impact of the RTA teachers, in terms of from the perception, so thinking from different perspectives, the RTA teacher reports high agreement that the +1 teacher and the +1 initiative are impactful to their practice and to their school. So we asked many questions around, do you feel like the classroom teacher, or I'm sorry, the +1 teacher has positively impacted literacy capacity? Has it helped other classroom teachers improve their practices? Has it been helpful in improving the Read to Achieve teachers' abilities as an interventionist? Will it be a benefit in years to come? And are they seen as leaders in the school? And you can see that agreement is high and strong agreement is relatively high as well. And we also looked at this over time. So you can see that from 2017 to 2018 to the end of the cycle, the strong agreement increases over time. There is in the last year a little bit more disagreement in terms of how much the teacher has been helpful at improving literacy in their school. So looking at that one question. So it appears from this last year at least that the program was having less of an impact moving forward. And actually, I believe that's changed for this next grant cycle, that the focus changes to providing professional development to the K through 3 teachers in the school in general. The interventions that were used in this last grant cycle, there were approved interventions, and most of the schools, most of the RTA teachers are using those approved interventions. You can see that the most was the CIM, followed by LLI, and then EIR and reading recovery. There were some others that were not approved, but also reported. And some of these, you can see that some of these are combined. So CIM, for example, is often combined with other interventions. In terms of student achievement, 48.79% of students had MAP data available for analysis. This has been a continual issue in trying to think about the impact of Read to Achieve for students who are not yet taking the state assessments, because that begins in 3rd grade. And so to find data where there is a pre and a post, the data that we have the most of across the state is the MAP data. And so that's what we used again for this analysis. And we have looked consistently year to year. The MAP student demographics are representative of the larger population of the Read to Achieve students. So even though it's a slice, it's a representative slice of all of the students receiving the RTA services. So in terms of the student achievement, I mentioned in the overall snapshot that from fall, you can see that in kindergarten, students are slightly lower, still slightly lower in spring. And that's true for each of the grade levels. But again, that's not surprising. This is the slice of the students who are being targeted to improve their reading skills. So this is where they were fall to spring compared to the national norms. And then this is their growth fall to spring. And you can see that for the most part, there was more growth among the Read to Achieve students than the national norm growth. It was about the same in 1st grade, but in other years, and actually a little bit lower in kindergarten, but for the other years, the Read to Achieve students grew more than the national average. I'm going to show you a snapshot of the impactful literacy practices, and you will not be able to read the small print. But what I want you to see is of the practices that were identified, and you can find all of the specifics in the report. But we have a picture of how the different stakeholders, the people who filled out the survey, how different people viewed the impact of practices. And so this is this is actually the difficulty of implementing the instructionally focused items. And so at times there are disparities in how the different groups view the different areas. Takeaways from the impactful literacy practices, thinking about how hard these are to implement, how important these are. We did a rank order last year of the impactfulness, and this year they rated again, how difficult is it to implement, and also how important is it? And the order was consistent, thinking about those two perspectives on literacy practices. But comparing responses based on the person role may provide good insights for professional development. So, for example, one thing we looked at was that 90% of administrators rated participating in school-wide data discussions, literacy, professional developments, and administrator-teacher collaborations as extremely high or high impact. And other groups saw these as lower in impact. So that would be a place to think about. This might be something that could be a place for professional development, thinking about moving forward in the next grant cycle. The cost analyses. We looked first at the cost to implement the Read to Achieve program. I mentioned before that the median cost for a school to participate is $70,000, and with limited variability across the types of Read to Achieve interventions used. So it's pretty consistent across schools how much they are spending overall on Read to Achieve. Again, $47,200 is provided by the state with the RTA grant, and then the median amount of supplemental funds the school is providing is $15,000, and then $7,500 is the median amount paid toward program implementation, assessments, professional development, so the non-teacher funds. And again, most funds are spent on teachers. It's 93% of their funds on average are spent on teachers. Looking at the cost to implement the programs, we were looking at the data from administrators, what they are reporting, how they spend the money. First, looking at reading recovery. The median school implementing reading recovery and using supplemental funds spent $3,000 on non-teacher expenditures. And this corresponds to a median expenditure of $375 per student, based on the number of students participating within each school. So this was the highest. Reading recovery was the highest per student cost. CIM, the median non-teacher expenditures of supplemental funds were $2,535 for the schools, and then $110 per student for that program. LLI, the median non-teacher expenditures of supplemental funds were $3,350. LLI is the highest investment of the 4 interventions for the school, but per student, it's $134. EIR, the median non-teacher expenditures of supplemental funds were $2,250 with $60 per student. And some of these funds per student overlap. So this is kind of a snapshot analysis as opposed to a very specific analysis. So it could be that a school, when we looked at the data, any school reporting an intervention was counted for that intervention, but data may have also been counted for other interventions. And that was something based on the way the data were organized and received, that this is the way that we could look at the funding. Literacy capacity. Regardless of the year, I mentioned this before, reading teams showed high literacy capacity, and this is their perceived literacy capacity. Again, each of the stakeholders was asked questions about literacy capacity, and when they rated their school, we looked at that from 17-18 to 21-22, that aggregate of how the different people perceived literacy capacity, and we found that about half increased and about half decreased, with most showing significant changes in their perceived literacy capacity for the reading teams. But when we looked at the aggregate, we didn't see overall significant growth for the reading teams' literacy capacity. For the schools, again, schools generally show high literacy capacity. And when we looked at the individual schools, we saw, again, about half increased and about half did decrease, but and most showed significant changes, and overall there was a significant increase. So they did grow significantly in their perceived literacy capacity for the school. Program comparisons. So this analysis, we looked at specific interventions on student achievement. I mentioned again earlier that we looked at MAP. So this is how we did these analyses. We pulled out first grade as one set of analyses, and we looked at second grade as another set of analyses. So when we pulled out from MAP, it did pull down the number of students because we were having to think about looking at schools that had more than 10 read to achieve students. And it may be that the schools didn't have the interventions that we were looking at. So we were specifically looking at the approved interventions for this analysis. So you can see that of the first grade students, we were able to look at 4,374 students. And second grade was 2,835 students. The findings on student achievement. The reading recovery appears to be more effective than other interventions in the program. These are the approved interventions at helping first grade struggling readers improve their reading achievement during first grade. So students who were receiving reading recovery grew significantly more in first grade from fall to spring than those who were receiving other interventions. The comprehensive intervention model, so CIM with reading recovery, those two are often coupled, also has potentially positive impacts on improving students' reading in first grade. So we also saw when it was either, when it was coupled with reading recovery, that there were modest gains as well when that was an intervention used. In second grade, the analyses did not reveal any significant differences in how the different interventions impact student reading achievement. So it doesn't mean they don't impact it. It just means that there's no difference in how the different programs impacted growth among students. And then the EIR and level literacy intervention appeared to be less effective among the 4 interventions in the first and second grade. It wasn't a significant decrease, but the schools that were using this, it was a negative impact, but again, not significant. So what we can conclude is that those 2 interventions were less effective than the other interventions in first and second grade. And then meaningful data were available across a 2-year period because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, as you all know, data were not collected for a year in there. So we were able to we did pull the data that we could and looked at the data for the last for a 2-year period, but we were not able to look at the years of the COVID pandemic. So overall reflections and recommendations, looking at the literacy capacity as well as high impact practices, the places where there were discrepancies in how people viewed, the different stakeholders viewed impactful practices, places that could be helpful for professional development include promoting consistency in implementing instruction across different teachers and environments, meaning that teachers in different places know what the student is doing and they are complementing each other. And that the student would know that the teachers know what's happening in the different areas. That was something we learned is helpful, that there's communication across teachers who are working with individuals. Professional development that promotes flexibility in instructional methods and builds data literacy for instructional decision making. A consistent recommendation we've had is that a lack of consistent assessment in K through 3 classes will continue to make assessment of impact difficult in the years to come. It's not impossible. You can see that in this round of analyses, we were able to looking at the MAP data, and it is a representative snapshot, but it's not of all the students in the Read to Achieve program. There are often questions of impact, so we were able to answer questions within Read to Achieve, and I know that many times there are questions of, is this program making a difference for students in general? And so there needs to be coordination with state data systems and external groups to answer questions of interest related to impact, if that is of interest. The future evaluation, we are making recommendations on what this might look like. I think another group will pick this up from here. But the recommendation for the future is to evaluate the current grant requirements and ensure compliance with the law. That the upcoming evaluation should focus on the use of grant funds, The impact of professional development on teacher practice. This next round of funding is about really pouring into schools around professional development as opposed to featuring specific programs. So it'll be more about teaching how to teach reading well. The impact of the RTA program on student literacy. So this would be outside of the program, but thinking about how does the program, does it have an impact for students across the state? Parent engagement with resources, that's another new piece of the grant for this next round. And that's all. So thank you. If you have questions or comments, we'll have some time now to answer those. So let's see, let me stop share. Okay. And I have Josh on here too, to refer to the report if you all have specific questions.
I just have a quick question. Is there somewhere that we can get a copy of this report for our own keeping?
That is a question for KDE. We provided the report to them, and I'm not sure how that, if they've posted it or can make that available, but that is available through the state. So someone else on the call may be able to speak to that.
Yes, Bobby. So when we do our follow-up email, we can include the presentation that's shared today by Dr. Sampson, as well as the full report for your review as well. So we'll get that for you.
All right,
Thank
I'll send
you.
you all that presentation too then.
Thank you, Dr. Sampson. Appreciate that.
Shannon, I had a question about the cost analysis and what what kind of tools you use to do that.
It was the administrator survey that they report out on how much money are they providing, and we are comparing it to what programs are you using in your school. What we don't know is that this individual student is receiving this program only, and so that all changes. So we were basing it, it's kind of a crude analysis again, based on what the principals are reporting. How much are they spending? How much are they spending on the different areas, assessment, PD, that sort of thing. So it is a principal driven cost analysis based on their information.
Okay, thanks. So you weren't able to get in and look at the ingredients beyond what the principals gave you?
No, and that's something, so that as we were beginning to look toward the future, I think asking some more specific questions on the principal survey to be able to drill down would be important. So that there are we have suggestions for the next evaluation group, and I don't know what that will look like, but just in terms of gathering baseline data for teachers on where they are in terms of their own capacity for literacy, but also that piece of specifically how funds are spent. That's another, the questions can be asked slightly differently to provide, I think, a more drilled down analysis.
Well, and to be able to get better at modeling out what the different ingredients are involved in every intervention. So to even drill down into lights, whatever resources are used in there. I think IES has a really nice cost effectiveness analysis kit that obviously you're not going to be doing the evaluation the next time, but KDE might want to consider looking at those resources and tools, because it enables you to look at cost effectiveness in terms of not just the programs you're looking at, but also business as usual comparisons. And so that would mean, much more data, but to get a better image of that for legislators and funding agencies would be important, because from the data that you showed, it looked like it was just a very rough cut, and there's a much deeper analysis that can be done if the right tools are provided to be able to do that. It sounds like you were pretty limited in what you were able to get.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is if a school is new to Read to Achieve, so they might be investing 1 year much more than if this is something they've been doing for a while. So there may be some sort of startup. Those are some things that are difficult to know. What are the yearly costs for this program versus once you have something? Is it just professional development for the teacher? Is it and to what extent is the teacher really what's important over the program? And that's really the direction the next cycle has gone, is building up the teaching quality as opposed to focusing so much on the intervention. And that's another challenge, not a challenge, but there's much more autonomy for schools, for districts to use what they feel like is best for their school. So there isn't a list of prescribed interventions. And actually, I can speak a little bit to that, but that's actually more of a state comment in terms of how the next how the future Read to Achieve rolls out. But I know that was something in response to some of the past evaluations to focus more on teacher quality as opposed to sort of just program.
Janice, I would also just add that we did, we explored some different ways to implement for gathering the data related to spending and breaking it down. And we did, we had some different, things in there, asking them funding, what they put in, in the past versus current, and trying to break it down by the types of funding sources, these different, the different types of things that they were investing in. And when we got the data back, I think it was a little bit of a challenge for some of the principals. And I think that's partly our fault as, the evaluators for not preparing them is well enough in advance for that. So I think if that's something that this group really wants to invest time and energy into exploring, I think, making sure that that's put in place earlier, given to the principals, like a worksheet or something far in advance, not just this kind of one-time implementation like we were doing, because I think that was a barrier to us getting as good of data as we could have.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's helpful to know.
I had a question about, you mentioned that you were only able to use 2 years worth of the testing data because of the impact of COVID school year. And I'm in kind of a unique position because I have a first, third, and fifth grader in my house. And I'm on here as the parent voice, I guess. So I could speak a little bit from this angle, what it looked like to see a child who had a normal start to school, my fifth grader, my third grader who was in kindergarten at the start of the pandemic, and my now first grader who had what I would call typical start to school as well. My third grader and his peers have had a very different experience in learning to read, very different than my first and my fifth grader. And so I just kind of wondered if in your research, how you accounted for not just that they didn't test in the same routine, but also that they did not have the same instruction. And that might speak to what you're looking forward to as, potential focus on teacher impact. I would say from the parent perspective, and I have a professional background in education as well, but from the parent perspective, that had a huge impact in my children's education and ability to learn to read. And also the strides that we've had to make now as a third grader, he's having to make major strides and has just now gotten on grade level with reading, whereas my fifth grader was on, a fifth grade reading level in first grade. So, I guess my question is, how do we take the data we had, and then also that's such a hard thing to put our hands around. How did that impact it?
Yeah, how it impacted is hard. We do the COVID year and the following year, we had a lot of questions in the surveys to schools that addressed a lot of questions around how did you implement, who was showing up to your classes, like what was the percentage of students that came, how many times were you in or out of instruction? Because that one year, I guess that coming back, a lot of schools didn't start, or they did start, but they were back and forth. And so capturing that is hard, but there are a lot of data around what was happening in the individual schools during COVID. So yeah, I think we are considering it sort of a caveat for now, but I think it's something we have to pay attention to, as we've even seen just a lot. There have been a lot of sort of drops that we're seeing now in a lot of areas where we're just now starting to notice the impact, and hoping that the curve swings back up as we're back to normal, more normal instruction. Josh, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just would add that, so as evaluators, when we think about assessing the impact of a program, we ask ourselves, were the activities implemented as designed? And if they were implemented as designed, then we can use our outcome evidence, have a stronger case that our outcome evidence maybe is trustworthy, that we can say there's a relationship between those two things. And when COVID happened, it's really hard to make the case that the activities as designed for the Read to Achieve grant project were occurring as they were intended. So then you get the data from like the 2021, 2022 year, and you could see in the report, there were still challenges for a lot of schools, especially in that fall 21 semester. And so, I think that's the problem. I think that's the challenge that we have as evaluators, and why we chose to use the 2 years of data prior to COVID, because those 2 years were at least part of this grant cycle, and we didn't have that system-wide disruption. So that's why we chose to use those 2 years as much as anything else. Because that's the challenge of the evaluators. You want to be able to make the case that these activities occurred, so then we can actually make the case that the outcomes are related to them, and that was definitely the challenge with the COVID pandemic.
I would just like to add that I really appreciate that you all conducted it in the way that you did, because there's a huge concern that with this new grant cycle, we are going to see an increase in test scores and abilities, and we need to make sure that we realize that that increase is not only dependent upon professional development opportunities that are being given to teachers now as a result of this grant, but also because of the uplift from us getting out of COVID. Our test scores for our students that are going to be third graders next year is going to look much different than what it's going to look like for the kids who were impacted by COVID. So I really appreciate that you all took that time to think about those things and just look at the years before COVID, because otherwise it skews your data tremendously, which is what we don't want to happen with this grant cycle that we have currently. We don't want to look at our data in 4 years and say, oh, we've grown exponentially, without also looking at the fact that students were affected by COVID previously. So I appreciate that you did it in that manner.
And I would just add, I'm looking at the report, and so in this past cycle we asked them, and the same thing we asked in the previous cycle, the level of disruption they had kind of as a result of the pandemic. And it wasn't like a detailed, so detailed of a question, but we were just asking, we asked them, you had no more disruptions to instruction than a normal year, slightly more disruptions due to the pandemic related issues, or significantly more disruption due to the pandemic related issues. We kind of boiled most of our COVID questions down to this for this last cycle, and only 30% of them reported that they had just a kind of a standard year, rather than, that didn't really have anything to do with the pandemic. Half of them reported slightly more disruptions, and then 22% reported significant disruptions still due to the pandemic in the 2021, or excuse me, the 21-22 school year. That's the report we're looking at. So it's still obviously a challenge for a lot of the schools out there. And so we do try to capture that in the report as well.
One other thing I would say, thinking forward, just the recommendation for the next group that will study this, one of the if you're going to use map data do not come from the state. You get them directly from NWEA. And so the individual districts provide approval for that. And the nice thing about MAP, there are some challenges with MAP. It's diagnostic. It is not it's not designed to look at a hard number of student achievement, but it is a pre-post. And it does happen. It's the one that's the most consistent across the state. So as we were beginning to think about how to get approvals and set up a study design, because with COVID, the reality is it happened to everybody. So it did disrupt in different ways. But when you think about if you were able to do a random study or even a quasi-experimental study, you can look to see what kinds of things were similar in districts, and can we match districts that are getting RTA versus not, or schools that are getting that receiving the grant funds versus those that are not. And then some of that washes out. So in thinking about this next round, somebody will have to go to the schools, go to the districts and get that approval. And that's something to consider, is getting and that was part of the plan, to get a sample of similar schools to the ones receiving Read to Achieve. That could be a good comparison group to see what's happening in general across all of the students, and then how is the RTA program impacting what's happening.
And just one thing to add to that is, if that is a kind of the plan going forward, talking to those school districts about how they interpret and use MAP. I mean, we know some schools, it's a serious test for them, and they're putting expectations on the students. Are coached. They're expecting them to,
they know, they know what their target is.
And we know some schools, it is much more diagnostic. It's just there to get a snapshot of what's going on. So if the schools treat the test differently, that can mess with your reliability of your data. So, if someone is going to be pushing forward with trying to do much more of like a experimental or quasi-experimental study, having those schools kind of thinking about MAP the same way would be an important step too.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Sampson and Mr. Parsons. We appreciate your report today, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'll send you you have the report, and I'll send you today's PowerPoint.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right, the next thing on the agenda is a early literacy initiatives update, and that is me. So I'm going to share my screen and my PowerPoint with you. And can everybody see that? Good. Okay. So just for the group, because I am new to the group, I want to kind of introduce myself very quickly. My name is Christy Biggerstaff. For 20 years, I worked in a rural school district here in Kentucky. I've been a teacher, an assistant principal, a principal, and an instructional supervisor for the last 8 years in Monroe County. So I've kind of ran the gamut as far as school positions go. I was a reading and writing teacher in elementary school. So literacy has kind of had a ongoing thread in my career. I've been very passionate about literacy, and specifically early literacy. So as we go into the information that I'm going to share with you today, I always like to start with the why we are focusing on early literacy. And if you can see the screen, you can see that we have K-Prep proficiency results for the last several years noted there. And this, I want to tell you that I could have pulled further information back to, this just is kind of a representative sample of what we have been seeing for the last several years in Kentucky. So as you can see, around half, just to average, around half of our students in Kentucky are proficient and distinguished on the 3rd grade assessment. And of course, we've done a lot of talking about COVID earlier, and that did exacerbate kind of our issue with literacy to begin with. And in 2021, that percentage dropped to almost 30% of our kids are proficient and distinguished. The significance of 3rd grade reading proficiency is huge. We know just by research and by data that if they are proficient by 3rd grade, they are less likely to have problems with attendance, with dropping out, with self-esteem. They are going to perform better. I know in a lot of the research, there was something not too long ago that I was reading of the Texas state penitentiary system, and their entire population of inmates, half of them, 50%, could not read at grade level. So it is a huge indicator of the success that students are going to have further in life, further in their academic career. And I know that none of us in the state of Kentucky, none of us on this call today is okay with only half of our students being proficient and distinguished by 3rd grade. It is a big problem. So that is why we are focusing on increasing that. I'm going to delve deeper just a little bit into the subgroups so you can see that 70% of our Black students in Kentucky on the 2019 grade 3 K-Prep reading test, 70% were below proficiency. That is an astronomical number. 55% of our economically disadvantaged, 70% of our English learners. I could go on and on. We do have an issue with literacy in the state of Kentucky, and we know that. So now we have to start thinking about what we have done in the past is not working. Obviously, I don't think any of us, as I said earlier, are okay with half of the students being proficient, so it's not working. We have to think about doing something different. Doing something different or doing the same thing is going to give us the same results. So we have to do something different. So let's talk about the something different that is coming to Kentucky in this past year. In 2022, the Read to Succeed Act was put into place, and it has a lot of different moving pieces and parts, and I'm just going to focus on a couple of those today. But as you can see on the screen, it fully funds the Read to Achieve grant. It allows us to give professional learning support strategies to our teachers. It focuses on early intervention and instruction. There are some pieces that involve a reading improvement plan, family and community engagement, and then a teacher certification piece. So we're going to talk about, first and foremost, the intervention portion, and that's the early literacy screener and diagnostic assessments. So in the bill, it states that by January the 1st, 2023, each superintendent shall select at least one reliable and valid universal screener and one reliable and valid diagnostic assessment, and that's to be given in K through 3 students. Now, it's very important that that both of our universal screeners and our diagnostics have those two components, because it's by law that they are reliable and valid. So we come up with a selection criteria, and that criteria is developed with the National Center of Intensive Intervention at the American Institutes of Research, screening tools chart rating system, and I can send you a link to all of that. And it's also, we took information from the Institute from Educational Sciences as well. So this is not our criteria that we developed. We thought very thoroughly about this criteria, and it's not astronomical as well. It is not something that we put so high that the diagnostics and the screeners cannot reach that. It is a median of all of those tools that I talked about today. All of that information can be found on the Early Literacy Screening Assessments webpage on the KDE. We have those lists, but I wanted to kind of show this group the list that we have had thus far. Now, I want to go back, though, with our criteria. I get a lot of questions in my position from districts saying, why isn't X assessment on the list? And that generally happens for one of two reasons. Number one, they did not have a technical manual. It was imperative that these formal assessments have a technical manual due to the fact that we had to, by law, state that they were valid and reliable. And within that technical manual, it has the data, so we can look at that and to ensure that they meet that criteria. So number one, if they're not on our list, they did not have a technical manual, and we were not able to ensure that they were reliable and valid. Or number two, they did have a technical manual and they did not meet the criteria that was set before them. So the recommendations that you're seeing on the screen for the early literacy assessments, the universal screeners, you can see there that we have 7. And we want this to be a fluid list, meaning that we are going to look at assessments yearly to ensure that they still meet our criteria, and that there are not other assessments that we need to add to the list. These are our diagnostics that you can see there. Something to note for districts, because coming from a district perspective, it's very difficult to purchase 2 different assessment systems. So we do have several assessment systems on our list that are the same company. And again, these are recommendations, but we went through a very thorough, long process looking at the universal screeners and the diagnostics to, as I stated, ensure that they were reliable and valid. So the second piece, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'll stop there.
I was going to pause for Bobby. Yep.
Thank you. I guess I just have a quick question, because at the beginning, when Sarah was sharing what our roles and responsibilities and purposes were of the grant, it stated that one of our things is to advise the Board of Education on universal screeners, diagnostic reading assessments, and professional development. And since we have not had a meeting, these were posted on KDE's website on 12/6/22. So I was just wondering how you all were able to do that without having any guidance from the steering committee, since that's technically what our purpose is.
Sure. So Bobby, you are advising on the recommendation. So if there are things that are not on the list that this committee wanted to recommend that the KDE look into, we are certainly able to do that. If the appointments for the committee had been in place sooner, if we had been able to get quorum, as you all know, we have tried to have this meeting much sooner, but the KDE was still allowed to generate this list based on that selection criteria. And moving forward, you can certainly, as a committee, provide recommendations, feedback around the postings of both the universal screeners and the diagnostic assessments. We felt very motivated to provide the information in consultation with our MTSS specialists for superintendents, knowing that they had to have this selection made by January 1. So we could not wait to achieve quorum on the committee before that was posted. We really did have to be able to move forward so that they could make those determinations. And remember that these are going into place for the next school year. So all of the training would have to take place for the teachers either in the spring, summer, before those are implemented with fidelity beginning and then the next academic year.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Mm-hmm. I'll pause there. Do you all have any questions about the universal screeners and diagnostics that I have shared thus far?
Did I maybe miss the universal screeners list?
Yeah, I'll go back. This is the universal screeners.
Okay, thank you. I did miss it. Thank you.
And just to point out and note that iReady says diagnostic. That is their official title for that assessment. But it was found by our committee to not be a diagnostic, but more of a universal screener. So that trips up people sometimes, and because they have diagnostic in the name. But that's the universal screeners, and then that's the diagnostics. And I will send a copy of this presentation to this group when I do the follow-up email as well. Any other questions? Right. Let's talk about the Kentucky Reading Academies, because that's the one piece that we have been really excited about in the state of Kentucky. And our purpose was, and let's go back to the why that we started with this presentation. And half of our students are not proficient in reading by the third grade test. So we had to do something different. The Kentucky Reading Academies is giving that professional development that is different. And our purpose, the whole purpose of the Reading Academies, is to increase the student outcomes. So to increase that 50% to what we would like to see 100% of our students at third grade reading on grade level. So what makes the Kentucky Reading Academies unique? It removes the financial barriers that have been in place. So every participant that would like to, or every teacher in the state of Kentucky that would like to participate can absolutely participate. The professional learning that we are offering is expensive. I know, as I said, I was from a rural school district in the state of Kentucky. We could have not afforded the price to send a lot of our teachers to this training. So it removes that financial barrier. It gives them the training about the, and I'll get into the training name in just a minute, but it gives them the training to help our literacy scores and our student success improve. It invests in people. So the professional development that we are giving is not a curriculum. It's not a program. It is learning. It is information. We know that knowledge is power. So we know that we need to help our educators be more educated and have more knowledge about how to teach our kids how to read. It's comprehensive, it's evidence-based, it's research-based. You can implement this learning with any curriculum that you have in your district. You can, any program that you have in place. This information, as I said, is just information. It's knowledge, and it will align with anything that you have going on in the district. And it's sustainable. And you can keep that information, and that information will travel with that teacher throughout the rest of their careers. So the professional development that we are giving during this Kentucky Reading Academy's round is letters, language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. It helps our teachers to determine what to teach to help our kids be more successful at reading. It recognizes the why some of our students struggle, and then it gives them strategies to help those struggling readers. And then I think importantly, it helps them to understand how students learn how to read. And if they know the how, then the what and the why becomes a lot more simple and easier to see. So letters is the professional learning that we are giving through the Reading Academies. What does that look like? Well, it is an extensive amount of learning. It is challenging, to say the least. It is a 2-year course of professional learning. There's 4 units per year, 8 units total. It is set up very much like a master's course, an online course that educators take, and they have a platform. There is information. There's print manuals provided as well. They go through the information on the platform. At the end of each unit, there will be a live webinar for each of those units that they attend from a national letters presenter that kind of reiterates and goes back over the learning that the teachers were supposed to get from that specific unit, and then gives them some more information. They get to speak to each other in cohorts when they're in these live webinars and kind of share information or share struggles or share resources that they have. So the live webinars have been very impactful from our participants that are giving us information and feedback back. But I think all of those pieces together really has made this a very, as I said, challenging but informational professional development that we have been giving them. So at this point, our educators that are in phase 1 have finished with 2 units. So there's 4 units in this year. So they're finished with 2, and they're now beginning to work on unit 3. And in May, we will open up another phase 2, for new participants. We're hoping that we can get that is our goal, that we can get every K-5 educator that works in Kentucky to participate through this professional learning, because it is just that good. It has that good of information in this professional learning. So it is open to all public Kentucky educators, any type of educator, any type of specialist. We also have an administrator track that is letters for administrators that we have our administrators participating in. That is a 1-year track. It's a little different, kind of gives a broad overview of the learning for the teachers, and then helps them to sustain that information within their schools. So as I said, phase 1, we currently have 1,800 participants. We really feel like we're going to have people, as they are talking and as they are learning, more and more people to jump on with phase 2. The impact that the letters training has already had has been felt in Kentucky. As I said, it's research-based, so that impact has been noted in other states. So we can go back and see that this learning did improve student outcomes, and that is why we chose the letters as the professional learning for the Kentucky Reading Academies. I wanted to share just a little bit. I mentioned earlier that we did give a survey to our participants. As I said, that only through 2 units of the 8 at this point. So we gave them a survey in early January and had almost 500 people to respond to that survey that are taking phase 1 of the letters training. And we have had a wonderful, wonderful response from those participants saying that 94% of them said this is brand new learning or relevant information. So that information alone is impactful, as this is valuable information that they needed and they did not know. 92% stated that the information they've learned helped them to meet their students' needs better. And then we have a ton of them that were willing to give written testimonials that share their classroom gains. I absolutely love reading it because, for example, I know I was reading yesterday or the day before of a specific teacher in Kentucky that had said, when I started, I'm a 3rd grade teacher, and when I started the letters training and she's gotten through the 2 units, she had a student to walk into her classroom and say, I can't read and I'm not good at reading. And she said, that shouldn't be the case for our 3rd grade students. She said, but now after implementing just the little amount of information she's learned from the 2 units thus far, she said he has made tremendous growth and gains in a very short amount of time. She said, is he still behind grade level? Of course, but she has a lot of catching up to do with him. But the gaps that he has already closed in the short amount of time that she's been able to implement some of the strategies and information that she has learned, she said he now volunteers to read. He now loves to read, raises his hand and says, can I read? So that to me is very powerful. It shows of the impact that it's having with our students in the state of Kentucky. I won't read the spotlight there on the right, but there are many of our educators that are saying, I've been an educator for 20, 22, 25 years. And I have never heard this information. I've never learned this information. And it absolutely is making a positive impact in my classroom on a daily basis. So we will have a formal evaluation of this professional learning, of course, but just some of that data that we needed from our participants, that we've gathered from our participants, is saying that this is relevant and good information that they're getting. So we do have some resources available on our website. We do have a Senate Bill 9 guidance document that helps districts. It talks about the universal screeners and the diagnostics, the reading improvement plan, all the other pieces that I don't have time or wasn't able to kind of talk about today. That will all be forthcoming. We also, as I stated, have the valid and reliable early literacy assessment screeners on our website. And the Kentucky Reading Academies has its own website with that information. So I will stop there and ask if you have any questions about the Reading Academies.
I have questions about the research underlying the letters training.
Sure.
So Dr. Almacy and Christy, feel free to add on, but I can speak to this. So we had to provide a rich evidence basis to be able to utilize our ESSER ARP funding for this via the federal government. And so there is a REL study. There was another study that was conducted by Excel and Ed that we provided. It has a promising rating from IES. And then we also had various case studies from different states, in addition to, of course, the Mississippi experience. So all of that can be shared with you all as well. If you're interested in seeing that, we'd be happy to pull that together for you. And again, just our qualitative data has been very positive to this point. We are going to be opening up an RFP for a third-party evaluator. So we need transparency. We need someone who is unbiased. We need someone who is not connected to a specific program or vendor to be able to really look at what's being done and give us feedback so that we can utilize the Read to Succeed Fund in the areas for which it will have the greatest impact and provide the best supports to teachers across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I would appreciate seeing the research as well, because it is my experience that there is a big difference in case studies and study analysis and actual research. So if you have that, I would love to see it.
Sure, we can. We have an entire Google folder that we had to create because of the ESSER ARP fund demand. So we can get that to you as well. Thank you.
Nikki, I'll be happy to pull those and we can add it with Dr. Sampson's report as well, and we'll be able to send everything to everyone,
Perfect.
maybe at one time. So I'll get to work on that too.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're very welcome.
I was also wondering if you could talk about, what kind of pre and post test data you're gathering as you're involved in this implementation.
Sure, Christy, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I was just going to say that we do have, like, the actual letters platform gives a pre-assessment to all of our participants, kind of an overview of the information that they will be learning in units 1 through 4. And then at the end, there's assessments embedded throughout all of the learning. They do have, the pre-assessment and then a unit post-assessment and then a section assessment that they take at the very end of the first 4 sections. So we've been able, just in the participants that have taken each of the units, been able to see a lot of growth between their pre-assessment information and then their post-assessment that they've taken between each unit. Of course, we're not finished with the first year yet. Not all of our participants. Some of our participants has gone through the learning of the first 4 units, but not all. But we have really seen a lot of positive gains, a lot of gains in knowledge with that pre and post assessment that's embedded within the letters platform.
Thanks. I'm a little bit familiar with the Mississippi data that came out, and my concern with that data and why I'm expressing concern here is that Mississippi data is, it shows growth, but by post-test time, those teachers were, as a university professor, they would have received a failing grade. I mean, they were getting less than half of the questions on that post-test correct. So yes, they made gains, but they were getting like 17 out of 33 was, I think, somewhere around the mean correct. So, that's great, but I'm worried just because if that's what supposedly the miracle is, that's still not going to help that 50 to 70% of children in our state that are struggling. That kind of information is not going to be helpful. It might show growth that might not be the kind of growth we need in order to move the needle, is my point.
And I think the RFP that Mickey talked about earlier that we're going to give, that will give us a non-biased evaluation of the program, that we're going to be able to look at that information and see, and I called it a program, and it's not a program, professional learning. We're going to be able to look at that information that the RFP will gather for us and see, is this being effectively implemented? Are our participants learning that information? Because it is our, true hope and wish to go back to the why, to help our kids, to help get more than 50% of our kids at proficient and distinguished levels. So, if it is not working, I do not feel like KDE will still, want to implement something that an RFP or data says is not working at this time.
And Christy, the only thing I'll add is that we are not seeing this singular letters training as a miracle.
Right.
We believe that this is, it's opt-in, so it's not required that people participate. However, because it has, again, the evidence basis that we'll share with you, we felt like it was a good first step for teachers who have an interest in learning more about how students learn to read and why some do struggle. So we will be tracking that, but we definitely don't see this as being the only professional learning that will be provided as a result of the Kentucky Reading Academies. In fact, we're hearing from numerous middle school and high school teachers who say we need supports to help students learn how to improve their reading skills at reading grade level text. So this is just the first step. We do have funding for 3 phases of this work, but we will constantly be reevaluating not only teacher efficacy and their capacities around this, but also how it is influencing student outcomes. And hopefully with the continuation of the Read to Succeed Fund, you'll see different iterations of the professional learning, and this committee can help to inform what those next steps may look like for teachers across the state.
Any more questions before I go on to the next agenda item today? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have our next item on the agenda is actually the adjournment. So
I actually have a question before the adjournment. When you said that, I thought, oh, there must have been something else that I didn't see. I just have a question. So the grant stated that the RFA stated that it would be awarded to 224 schools across the state, and only 154 were given out. So I was just wondering if there is a plan to utilize those remaining funds, which, according to my calculations, is $4,402,000. Is there going to be a round of mini grants like with the MFA? Or how are those funds that were not utilized for the RTA grant being utilized at this time?
Yes, Bobby. So Danielle Ward is with us this morning as well, but she is currently working on a similar Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Steering Committee mini grant that will pull from that $4 million for what you saw similarly for the Mathematics Achievement Fund. So that is in process and still under KDE review, but we hope to be able to release that RFA related to the mini grant in the coming months. The sooner, the better. We know that people need those resources, but we also have to be able to work with our Office of Finance and Operations to make sure that all of the processes are in place for the RFA, but that is forthcoming.
Do you have a loose timeline by any chance of when you think that might be released?
Danielle, do you have we talked to OFO about the timeline? I know that the draft of the RFA is nearly completed.
It is. The draft is undergoing. Before we put these out, we want to review them 2 or 3 times, and so we're on the 2nd or 3rd revision now. And we've spoken with finance, and they know that probably early spring is a good timeline for when it may be released.
And will this committee have an opportunity to approve that RFA before it goes out? I know last time we were able to approve the monetary amounts and not necessarily the grant until later. So will this particular committee be involved in that particular RFA in any capacity? And if so, how?
Sure. So, Bobby, all of that language in terms of the grant approval components were changed in the law. So what we can do is allow you to, and it may even be something where we share that via email and you all could take a look at that and provide written feedback. And if there is interest of the committee to meet to discuss it, then we could certainly do that. But we'll make sure, and Danielle, if you'll make note of that, we can share the draft of that with this committee before it becomes public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Our plan right now, unless something arises, is to meet again in the fall of 2023. After this meeting, I will send you an email with all of that information that was shared today, the reports, the presentations, so you can have a copy of that. So we're going to need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion?
This is Sam Sams. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Bobby Barrier. I second.
Thank you. And I'm going to go through roll call once again. And if you could, please state your name and say, I vote yes or I vote no on adjournment. Bobby Barrier,
Bobby Barrier, I vote yes.
Amy Adkins,
Amy Atkins, I vote yes.
oh, my screen just paused, sorry. Ashley Tackett, Dominique Pleasant Moore,
Dominique Pleasant Moore, I vote yes.
Janice Almacy,
Janice Almacy, I vote yes.
Sam Sams,
Sam Sams, I vote yes.
Jessica Sparrow,
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Molly Boyd,
Molly Boyd, I vote yes.
Paula Pleasant, Mary Bell,
Mary Bell, I vote yes.
Don Sexton.
Dawn Sexton, I vote yes.
That means we are adjourned. Thank you so much for being here today and for your time. I appreciate all of you.